In this video, we're going to look at taxonomy. We're going to cover what taxonomy is. We're going to look at Carl Linnaeus. We're going to look up the classification system that Linnaeus came up with. And we're going to look at binomial nomenclature as a way of naming scientifically different organisms. Taxonomy is like a filing system. It's grouping organisms with similar characteristics and giving names to those organisms, as well as giving names to the groups. Carl Linnaeus was the one that came up with the system of taxonomy that we now use. He was a Swedish botanist that lived at the start of the 18th century. And at the time, he looked around and he saw that the naming system that they had, the conventions that they were using to name things, they were really messy. Really messy. And they didn't know about that many species at the time. And he thought that he saw all these new species being discovered, and he thought this whole system that they have is going to fall apart because it's just so messy. And so he came up with a new system. And his system was to group things based on their physical form and their structure, and look at the physical form and structure and put them in different groups called taxa. By the end of his career, he had looked at and classified about 15,000 different species, mainly of plants, into this system of his. And we still use this system today, even though today we have more than 2 million different known species of organisms. We have modified it slightly because we've discovered organisms that we didn't have before, like single-celled organisms that they couldn't see at the time because they were too small. And we've also looked at changed some of the ways that things are related to each other, because from things like DNA sequencing, we've got more information now, so we're able to organize things a little bit better. But we still use the main taxa, the different names that he has. And those were kingdom, being the biggest with the most things in it, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and finally species. So species is referring to one particular type of organism. And in particular, it's a type of organism that can breed with other members of the species and produce fertile offspring. So species is very specific, and then there's a number of species that make up a genus, a number of genuses that make up a family, a number of family make up an order, and so on and so forth, until you get to the kingdoms. And there's 5 different kingdoms, and those 5 kingdoms contain all living things. Now, it's a bit hard to remember, but we use a mnemonic for it, and the mnemonic is kids playing chicken on freeways get smashed. So you can see this lines up. Kids kingdom, playing phylum, chicken class, on order, freeways family, get genus, smashed species. So if you just remember kids playing chicken on freeways get smashed, that'll give you the first letter of all the different groups, and you'll be able to remember what order to put them in and which one's bigger than the others. Let's have a look at this in action. So here we have a leopard. Now, of the 5 kingdoms, the kingdom that the leopard is in, it's an animal, so it's in the kingdom Animalia. The phylum it's in, so the kingdom contains a number of different phylum, and the phylum that this leopard is in is Chordata, meaning that it has a spinal cord inside a vertebrae. Within the phylum Chordata, there's many classes, and the class for this one is Mammalia. And within that class, there's many orders. In particular, this is the Carnivora class. Within that order, many families. This family is the Felidae. Within the genus, within the family, there's lots of genuses. In this case, it's Panthera. And within the genus, lots of species. This one, Pardus. So you can see that we're starting from all animals, moving down more and more specific until we get to just this species. And you've probably noticed that we're using Latin names. So instead of saying animal, we say animalia. That's a convention that was started by Linnaeus. In the time, all the scientists wrote in Latin, and it was considered to be a language of the educated, basically. So we still use Latin to these days for scientific names. Let's have a look at another example. Now this is the Western lowland gorilla. The kingdom, again, this is going to be an animal, so it's in the kingdom Animalia. It's in the phylum Chordata because it has a spinal cord. The class Mammalia, so it's a mammal, meaning that the mother feeds the young milk. It is of the order Primates, okay, so getting more specific, of the family Hominidae, I think that's right, down to the genus Gorilla, and then to separate this type of gorilla from other type of gorillas, this one is of the species Gorilla, which is a bit funny, but yep, that's what it's called. So the species is the Gorilla species. Binomial nomenclature, or binomial naming, all it means is two names. And this is where we get our scientific names. As I said before, the scientific names are in Latin. And all we need to do is look at the last two things in the Linnaean system, the last two things, and write those down. So the last two things, kids playing chicken on freeways get smashed, so it's get smashed, genus and species. Last two, genus and species. So to give the binomial name, the scientific name for the leopard, the panther that we were looking at before, we give the genus, which is Panthera, and the species, which is Pardus, which gives this animal the scientific name Panthera pardus. And if we go back to our Western lowland gorilla, so that's obviously the common name, the scientific name for the Western lowland gorilla consists of its genus, which is Gorilla, and its species, which is Gorilla. So it gives this Western lowland gorilla the scientific name of Gorilla. All right, in this lesson we have looked at taxonomy, which is merely grouping things and giving things named. We've looked at Carl Linnaeus, who was the one who came up with the system that we use at the moment, the Linnaean system of classification. The Linnaean system of classification, which we're going to remember by kids playing chicken on freeways get smashed, which is kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Okay, and you can see I'm saying it in my head. I'm going kids playing chicken in my head. We've looked at the binomial naming system, which is where we get our scientific names for in Latin, and they're just the genus and the species.